Welcome to Let the Quran Speak. I'm Aisha, your host. On our show today, we'll continue our exploration of controversial issues related to women. Let's explore the golden key that Dr. Shabir argues is vital to this discussion, ijtehad, or legal reasoning. What is it and why is it so important? Let's sit down and hear Dr. Shabir's thoughts on this. Welcome to the show, Dr. Shabir.
Pleasure to be on.
So we're talking about controversial issues related to women, and today's conversation is about the need for ijtihad is something that you're arguing for. What is ijtihad before we get into anything further?
Yeah. So ijtihad, the word ijtihad itself in Arabic is related to the word jihad, which means to strive, to struggle. Ijtihad is the verbal root in the eighth form, as the European grammarians of Arabic would have said. And this has the sense of a struggle to find the right ruling on a subject. This is how the term has been used in Islamic theology. So a mujtahid, the one who does this struggle, would have been one of great Islamic learning, who would have looked at contemporary situations and would have drawn out from the Quran and the life example of our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, new rulings to fit new and changing circumstances.
So in simpler terms, when you say the struggle for learning, it's basically there's an issue, so there's critical thinking involved, they do research, the mujtahid would do research, put everything together, and then come up with a ruling.
Yes, so there is a development over time in history, and there are four scholars who are widely recognized as being of this caliber. They are mujtahids, and there are four schools of Islamic jurisprudence that are widely followed throughout the world, and they're named after these four scholars: Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafi'i, and Ahmed bin Hanbal. Now, why then would a Muslim be saying, okay, I'm a follower of Abu Hanifa? Technically, we're followers of God's Prophet. We are obedient to God by following the way of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. But why doesn't the Muslim simply say, okay, I'm a follower of the Prophet? He says, I'm a follower of Abu Hanifa. Why? Because things have developed over time, and it took Imam Abu Hanifa, a man of his time, to look at the circumstances and give rulings that are fitting to the time, and people rallied around his call. In a similar way, Imam Shafi'i, Malik, Ahmed bin Hanbal, each in a different city, in a different circumstance. And Imam Shafi'i, rahimahullah, actually is known to have two sets of opinions. One formulated when he was in Baghdad, and another set of opinions formulated after he moved to Egypt. So people speak of Imam Shafi'i as being two, as if he were two persons, one in Baghdad, the other in Egypt. Now, why was he known to have two different sets of opinions? Because the circumstances were different. His exposure to learning, his exposure to incidents and so on, shapes his mind, and he comes up with new rulings. So in a similar way, the whole principle of ijtihad is like this. Not only with the one scholar, Imam Shafi'i, but from one generation to another, there will be scholars who will look at the new and changing circumstances and who will go back to the bases, the Quran and the life example of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and they will dish out for us the rulings which are pertinent to our present circumstance.
So are you arguing, so correct me if I'm wrong, but the different schools of thought and the different principles that we follow, isn't that in and of itself ijtihad? Or
They are the results of ijtihad.
Okay.
People may have the sense that we're getting the rulings directly from the Quran, or precisely as demonstrated by our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. But it takes a scholar to put that all together, because we don't know the entire Quran. And 6,000 and some verses, we don't know which verse really applies to our circumstance. It takes a scholar who knows it all to say, well, wait a minute, not that he knows everything like God, but he knows the entire Quran, so that he can say, okay, it's that particular verse that applies to your circumstance. Or when we come to the life example of the Prophet, peace be upon him, reports about his actions and sayings are in multiple volumes. The average person does not have the capacity or the time to read all of these volumes and to absorb them into a comprehensive whole. But a scholar who has done that, has made that his life work, can now tell us that, based on what I know of all of the hadiths, here is what applies to your circumstance.
So are you saying, so based on our discussion today about dealing with controversial issues related to women, are you saying we need a new process of ijtehad that needs to happen based on the issues that we're seeing today for women?
Yes, yes, definitely. There is a hadith in which it is said that the Prophet, peace be upon him, said that God will raise up for this nation someone who will renew the religion for this nation at the head of every century. So throughout history, people have been trying to identify who are these individuals for each century who served in such a great capacity that they were actually renewing the religion. This is ijtihad at its best.
And what do you mean when you say renew the religion?
Well, here we are using now, we're thinking more of a term, mujaddid, a renewer, or tajdeed, renewal, which stems from ijtihad, because the one who is going to do this renewal will have to obviously apply ijtihad, thinking and trying to apply the ruling to a new and modern time. And why this is most needed now is that things have changed so dramatically and continue to change so rapidly that definitely if there was a need for the thinking of Abu Hanifa and Malik and Shafi and Ahmed bin Hanbal, there is much more need for such thinking now because so much has changed.
So what would you say to someone that says, when we're talking about some of the topics that we're planning to cover, domestic abuse, the veil, what would you say to someone that says, well, we already have all of the information here, it's just about going back to the sources, it's not like domestic abuse is something new or veiling is something new. What would you say to that?
Well, what typically people have done with this sort of conservative approach to keep everything as they are as much as possible, is that they have made minor adjustments here and there. They have teased the traditions to, push everything to the boundaries as much as possible. And what is needed nowadays is a paradigm shift, because the boundaries have been pushed to the limits, to the breaking point. And there are things which do not fit within those boundaries, no matter how much the boundaries have stretched. It's almost like you're renovating an old home. You make changes here and there, improvements, you change the windows and so on. Eventually you realize that the best way to deal with this falling structure is to basically knock it down and rebuild it on the original foundations. Now the Salafi movement wanted to do exactly that. They wanted to rebuild on the original foundation, which is said to be the Quran and the Sunnah. But
based on the issues that are happening now and within the context.
Yes, and for a variety of reasons, they felt that it is necessary to rebuild on the original foundations. They thought that the thinking of people like Abu Hanifa and Shafi and Malik and so on often missed the point, and they wanted to go back to the Quran and the Sunnah. That approach has a good ring to it and can benefit us in modern times. The difficulty has been that within the Salafi movement, the idea of rebuilding on the original foundation was misplaced in that they misunderstood the original foundation. They took a largely literal approach to the Quran and the life example of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and what is needed now is a more comprehensive approach. Because when we come to think of, you mentioned the domestic abuse, well, typically in classical Islamic law, it was said that a man has the right to beat his wife, and that is hardly acceptable today, so we need to rethink this question.
I think we'll leave this for a discussion on domestic abuse, but I think you've laid a very good foundation, so thank you very much, Dr. Shabir.
You're welcome.
Hey YouTube, we hope you benefited from this video. If you liked it, or if you didn't, let us know in the comments below. And if you're interested in learning more, check out some of our other videos. And don't forget to subscribe so you can get new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.